Hey guys, so I'm hoping that this is looking okay. This is the first time I'm going to be shooting on a new camera. I do not have the perfect placement lined up here because this side of my face is not lighted, so I should probably be shooting somewhere else. But hey, choices were made and I'm gonna stick to them because I need to film now. I am here to update you guys on my October reading. So it is the 8th of October. My reading month has not been going great because I've barely been doing any reading at this point in time. So I'm hoping that from now on my month of October is a little bit more quiet. Yeah, I had quite a few things to take care of so far within the month of October, and this weekend, for example, has been packed full. So I haven't been able to read as much as I typically would. So I'm hoping that next week I can kind of focus on reading a little bit more because I do want to. And also I probably should DNF a book that I'm not enjoying at the moment because that's definitely also impacting me. But so, first two books that I read throughout the month. First one is The Collectors by Philip Pullman. This is a novella set within the world of his dark materials. In this one we are basically looking at these two professors who are discussing the kind of mysterious, problematic history of two pieces of art, this particular portrait plus a little statuette. And so it is a book that can be read before you dive into the main books in his dark materials, so you can read it before you dive into the first book in the trilogy, which is Northern Lights or The Golden Compass, depending on UK or US edition. And it would actually be interesting to see the impact that this book has on people reading The Golden Compass or Northern Lights for the first time, because it might impact your reading of a certain character. It might give you early clues as to the reliability of a certain character. But so yeah, I quite enjoyed it, but you know, it's a 65-page short story. It isn't all that deep. It just kind of really sets the mood, I guess, for his dark materials and for what his dark materials is. The second book that I finished is also one that I don't necessarily have a ton to say about. This is a book that I had already read the first half of within the month of August, I believe, even, so perhaps that is also part of the reason why I don't have too much to say about it, because I split it over so much period of time. But that is The Island of Missing Trees by Elif Shafak. The fact that I don't have much to say about it does not mean that I didn't enjoy this, because this book is definitely like a 4-star, maybe 4.5-star read. I highly enjoyed it. Elif Shafak is a writer that I'm just really like. It's one of my favorite writers at this point in time. I've read 3 books by her. The first one I didn't necessarily care all that much about. I liked like half of the book and the other half I just didn't really care all that much about. But then the second book by her that I read was a 5-star, an amazing read, one that I absolutely enjoy. And then so this one I also really enjoyed. It just didn't get to that same sort of level as The Bastard of Istanbul got to. So in The Island of Missing Trees we're basically looking at a sort of Romeo and Juliet type setup. We have a boy with Greek roots, a girl with Turkish roots, who live on the islands of Cyprus and form an attraction to one another. However, there are very many prejudices between Greeks and Turks because of the turbulent history of Cyprus. This story is told from different time periods. For example, the way that we enter into the story is through like more or less present day London, where the man is living together with his daughter after his wife has just passed away, and then throughout we will kind of dive back into time to figure out the history of this relationship, this love story. At the same time, it's also very much a story about Cyprus, very much a story diving into complex history of Cyprus, as well as other aspects to island life. One of the perspectives that this story features is the perspective of a fig tree growing up on Cyprus that is later moved to London along with our protagonist. Through the perspective of the fig tree and through the perspective of our male protagonist, who is a botanist, we also get a lot of nature facts about Cyprus, which I really highly enjoyed. And of course the perspective of the fig tree will offer a different perspective because of its non-human nature. It definitely has a different perspective, a different scope to offer when it comes to this story, and a lot more of a universal truth to be told. I also really enjoyed the exploration of a conflict that is central within this story, an event taking place on Cyprus that has had a huge impact on the relationship between Greeks and Turks, and it talks a lot about history and about the impact of history on the next generations, for example. And in principle, it doesn't talk too much about the event in and of itself. It definitely is featured and it definitely is shown, but it also talks a lot about the aftermath and finding answers to unresolved questions about the toll of that event on relationships within the island, for example. So I really highly enjoyed this one, and it's another reason for me to pick up more Alicia Fuck in the future. Hey guys, probably around time to kind of update you guys on my reading so far for the month. I am very much in a lazy mood today, so pajamas, unwashed face, unwashed hair, here we go. So the book that I have since finished is Mother for Dinner by Shalom Auslander. This will be in my cannibalism vlog. So Mother for Dinner is a book in which we are looking at a cannibalist American family, and so they have been passed down the tradition of cannibalism throughout the generations. However, the current generation that we're kind of following, we meet up with them at the brink of their matriarch, their mother's death, as they tackle the question of whether they should continue on with these traditions, as most of them have basically turned away from the traditional cannibalist American lifestyle in order to integrate more into regular American life. And so it is a dark comedy to some extent, but I will say that I expected it to be darker, I expected it to be funnier as well. It very much is a clear analogy with the way in which religious, cultural traditions might disappear through the generations after emigration has taken place. But so I enjoyed it, but it definitely let me down. It definitely was something that I was expecting a lot more of. I did enjoy that sort of analogy, but it also was super on the nose. It was so clear, so obvious that kind of took away from my enjoyment of it. So yeah. All in all, a very much middle of the road book for me in the end. So I just filmed an update for my cannibalism vlog, and now I need to update you guys. So my full sort of like explanation of why I'm DNFing this book is in that vlog if you want to check it out. But so I'm DNFing A Certain Hunger by Chelsea G. Summers, 98 pages into this book. This is a cannibalism book, as indicated. It is a book about this young woman who was a food critic, a very successful food critic in New York, and she, at the beginning of the book, we find out that she's incarcerated at this point in time for having killed a guy that she had like a one-night stand with, basically. And so I will already spoil for you guys that it is a cannibalism book, which is basically the reason why I went into this. And I kind of started to doubt that after a while, but on like page 95 or so we get our first mention of cannibalism. But so this one is very much a book that the narrator in this book very much loves the sound of her own voice, and that, for example, is something that really irks me. And I can kind of understand that is a point, but that writing style just really doesn't work for me. It's just an overly indulgent writing style. And the person that we're looking at, so our character, is a food critic, as I said. So food is discussed so many times throughout this book, like every few sentences almost. Like, I don't think you can get through a page of this book without food being mentioned. And I love food in literature, but in this one, it just didn't do anything for me, I wasn't excited about the food that she was describing. The way that she was describing it didn't make me go like, hungry. Whereas that is typically why I love descriptions of food in literature. But when I like it, it's more like linked to tradition, to culture, to family gatherings and those things. There's always a sort of like emotional layer to the description of food. The food that is described isn't just something that people are putting in their mouth. It has a meaning, it has a layer of culture, of tradition, of family to it. And so in this one that is not the case, and that's probably part of the reason why I don't like the food description in here, or why they didn't really do anything for me in here. And the writing style itself, aside from those food descriptions, is just so condescending in the terms of the voice of the narrator, and just so self-indulgent in terms of its descriptions. One of the things that they say is like, drop the adjectives, I think, right, in your writing, and this person definitely needs to do that. There are some sentences in which I was just like, oh, please, just say it as it is. Stop like putting 20,000 extra words in there just because it sounds lyrical. So if you like lyrical prose, this could work for you, because this definitely is verging on lyrical. It's not the most annoyingly lyrical book that I've ever read. I could push through this one without too much effort, but it is definitely a writing style that made me roll my eyes quite often. So after looking at some negative reviews on Goodreads, even some mediocre reviews, I decided that I am not continuing through, I am not pushing through in order to get to the ending. This one, it's just not for me, which is a shame because I've been looking forward to reading this book for a very long time because I wanted a modern cannibalism book, but this one is not the one for me. So I finished another book, which is Tender is the Flesh by Agostina Bastarrica. I finished it like a week ago at this point in time, I think, but I really enjoyed this one a whole lot. So it is a dystopian novel translated from Spanish. It is an Argentinian novel, and it talks about a society that has decided to switch to the consumption of human meat because all animal meat has been infected by some sort of a virus. And so it talks about the way in which the consumption, the production, the breeding of human meat is industrialized, and thus making an analogy with the animal meat industry at this point in time. And while it starts off very much talking about breeding, processing and those types of things, and so having a very clear link to the way that we process animals at this point in time, as the book progresses further and further, we do see it explore more and more the sort of like implications of what it would mean if humans start to treat other humans as pure flesh, as pure meat, as just a product to be consumed. What does it do to our psyche, to our mentality, to our society? Really enjoyed this one a whole lot. I just think it's super interesting. Some of the criticism that I've seen leveled against it is that it does not talk about what happens to children within this world, which, going into the book knowing that criticism, it was invalidated because because children's meat is mentioned, but it's somewhere in the very beginning of the book, and it's also like very toned down, you know, you just have it referred to in this one scene. It's a minor scene at the beginning of the book, and definitely a lot of the other events in the book overshadow it a whole ton. And so if you read it without knowing that criticism, I guess by the end of it you can kind of be like, huh, did we ever talk about children? Are children also consumed for their meat? And I can confirm, yes, at the very beginning they do have like a barbecue with children's meat. Another one of the criticisms leveled against it is that why are we consuming human meat, why not just go plant-based? But I do think that that is kind of addressed within the book, and that is also the point that the book is trying to make. The point is to show how far humans would be willing to go in order to continue consuming meat, especially when such powerful industries such as the meat industry have a stake to claim, have a threat to deal with. I'm not going to go too much further into it here. I have a vlog in which I read this one, in which I give more of my thoughts about it, so if you're interested in more, then definitely do check that out. I am considering doing a full-length review for this one, so perhaps that one will also be coming your way. Hey guys! So it's been, I don't know, like less than a week still, I think. So it's Friday now, I have a few days left in the month only, and I'm here to update you guys about the next few books that I finished. And so first of all, I finished a translated novel. I finished The Picture Bride by Iyumi, translated by An Seonjae. This is a Korean historical fiction novel. As I said, it's just been translated. This was an advanced reader copy, so my thanks go out to the publisher and to NetGalley for giving me early access to this book. And I had an okay time with this one. I mainly found this one to be interesting because it was about a page in history that I didn't really know too much about. So I have previously read a book that was featuring Korean history, which was Pachinko by Min-Ching Lee, and I really enjoyed that one a whole lot. And so this also kind of looks at a similar period in time. It looks at the period in time in which Japan had control over Korea. However, in that book we're looking at people who moved from Korea to Japan during that time period, and here we're looking at a protagonist who left Korea to seek out new futures in the US. So in this one we're looking at our protagonist Willow, who is a picture bride. And so picture brides are basically these brides that enter into a marriage agreement basically purely on the basis of a picture. So they send a picture to the US and they receive a picture from a potential future husband, and based on mutual agreement they decide to enter into a marriage. But basically they know nothing about one another except for the picture that they've been given and the information that they've been given through a matchmaker. However, as these ladies will soon find out upon arrival within Hawaii, what the guys say about themselves and the pictures that they show of themselves aren't necessarily always very truthful. And so it's a historical fiction novel talking about that sort of like move into Hawaii, that sort of difficult relationship that these women have with these husbands that they don't really know and don't necessarily always care for, if the way that they portray themselves differs from what they were expecting. And I will say that I found it interesting in that sense, in the regards of I didn't know anything about Pictured Brides. I found it interesting to kind of see the life of these Korean women in Hawaii and to kind of see the way in which that's community arose within that setting. However, that was kind of more or less it for me. You know, in terms of its writing style, in terms of its overall plot line, its character work, it didn't necessarily do a lot for me. So the writing style isn't very compelling in my opinion. Structurally, there's also a shift to a different perspective late on in the novel at the 80% mark. It's kind of a little bit of a pet peeve of mine. I really don't enjoy it when a new perspective is introduced so late in the game, because then I kind of feel like the structure isn't perfect, you know, that it should have been better structured. I find it weird that you would write a book 80% in one perspective and then the final 20% in another perspective. But I did enjoy the ending. I did think that it had a nice, well-rounded, beautifully symbolic type of ending for this particular story. But yeah, it's gonna be one that's kind of gonna disappear from my memory, and the main reason why I think this is a good fit for you would be if you want to learn more about this period in Korea, or if you want to be able to see this type of a perspective, if this perspective is something that calls to you. Secondly, if you like reading about stories of like women who kind of have to, you know, take matters into their own hands, women who kind of take charge of their destinies. Our protagonist is somebody who has very much been put into certain situations in which her destiny always stays relatively small. She doesn't sit down and ponder the smallness of her life. She always takes charge, takes matters into her own hands, tries to see how can I improve this or that about my life, about my family situation. And yeah, I really admire that type of a protagonist. I really enjoy reading that type of protagonist, and so that is also something that you can find within this book, for example. So that is one that I finished earlier within the book, within the week. And then yesterday I finished another one, which is a beautiful copy. I finished The Book Eaters by Sunyi Dean. So this is the Illumicrated edition with this beautiful sprayed edge. Sadly, I did not care for this book, so I cannot tell you a lot of negative things about this book, except for the fact that I just felt very meh about this. So in The Book Eaters, we're kind of looking at this secret class of people, basically. Basically, book eaters are people who survive off of eating the pages of a book and absorbing the knowledge of that book through the act of eating it. And our protagonist in present day is a mother taking care of her child, and her child is a dreaded mind eater, meaning he doesn't absorb stories through books, he absorbs minds through eating the brains of people. So she is on the run trying to make sure that her boy can survive and that she can find a life for him that is worth leading. And simultaneously we will be going back into past timelines in order to figure out the story of her childhood, the story of her growing up, of the choices she has had to make the choices that have landed her in this situation. And in principle it's interesting, but I just really didn't care at all. There were some times in which I could kind of be like, I can see how this is an interesting point, however it didn't spark an interest in me neither, you know? And I really don't know what to blame that on, so I cannot steer you away from this book, I cannot recommend this book, because I personally just don't understand what this book was doing wrong for me. You know, the writing style was okay, character was interesting, structure was sound, plot I think was compelling, even though I was never compelled, but I can kind of look back and be like, okay, it was an interesting story, but yeah, it just never interested me. So this is one of those where I'm like, am I even a book reviewer? Because I cannot for the life of me give you a coherent review of this book. Alright, I was just editing this wrap up when I noticed that I'm missing some books. So first let me talk about the one that I finished since then. And so that would be The Subtle Knife by Philip Pullman, so the second book in his Dark Materials. This is a reread for me, and yeah, I mean, it's nostalgia. So in this series we're looking at basically this world in which children have demons, and demons are basically sort of like a animal companion that is a representation of themselves, I guess, and their feelings to some extent. It is part of, it can kind of be seen as their soul, I guess. And when children become adults, this animal takes on one form, basically, as they kind of get to know who they are. As they come into their personality, then they kind of have a demon that like fixes into shape. However, in the neighborhood, children seem to be going missing more and more often, and that together with the surprise visit from her uncle kind of sets the story in motion. I cannot really say too much about the story because I find it so difficult to narrow down the story into one coherent whole, but it is very much a nostalgia read for me, and I'm very much happy that the nostalgia holds up. I still enjoy this one a whole lot. And the second one was actually one that I don't really remember, like I didn't remember anything about it in advance, but going through it I was so happy to have these sort of like, ah yeah, moments all the time. Like reading the first chapter was already, oh right, that's the second perspective, and that's what this character was going through, and that's sort of the thematics that we explore within his storyline. And so yeah, it's just really like, it was just like a warm hug almost, you know, returning to this world, returning to this story, figuring out again what this story was like, what happens in it. So yeah, I'm so eager to continue with the Amber Spyglass in November. But so the things that I kind of forgot to update you guys are the DNFs. So I did update you guys about a recent DNF, but I did have 2 other DNFs in the month of October that I had forgotten to update you guys completely. So the first one is an arc, so that's kind of, it hurts my heart a little bit. So my thanks still go out to the publisher and to Ned Kelly for providing me with a free arc in exchange for an honest review, but this one just really wasn't up my street, and that is The Back Streets by Perhat Tursund. So this is an Uyghur novel from China, and this is written in stream of consciousness, and that's basically the problem, because I flew through the entire introduction. So there's an introduction at first from the translator about kind of giving you some background about the position of Uyghur people within China, the way in which Chinese government, society has tried to basically eradicate their lifestyle, their culture, their language, and kind of talking about the history of that, and thus setting a sort of like background for you to interpret the story better. And then also talking about his encounter with the author, about what the author has kind of been through in his life, and also an introduction into the story, into the thematic of the story and things like that. And I flew through that one. I found that super interesting. I don't know much about Uyghur society within China, so it was really interesting to learn more about them, about the relationship with mainstream Chinese culture. But then I just couldn't deal with the story. It was stream of consciousness, and like I just read the words, but I cannot link them together almost. Like that's my experience usually with stream of consciousness, where I just feel like it doesn't make sense, you know, it doesn't translate into actions because you're just, there are thoughts going on, and I'm just like, wait, what is happening? So I just had to give up on it because I was just really just continuing reading words, but I was not forming any thoughts or any impressions based on that. It just went over my head. That's writing style, it just really goes over my head. And then the second thing that I forgot to talk about is a very big release from this month, and that is Fairy Tale by Stephen King. So I picked up Fairy Tale on a whim, so I listened to the audiobook on script because I was pretty sure, and I am still pretty sure, that it will make it onto the Goodreads Choice Awards, and it will probably also win the Goodreads Choice Awards. So I wanted to kind of get a head start on that and read it. It was the first time in a very long time that I've actually been interested in picking up a Stephen King, but I was seeing quite some good press, some good reviews for it, so I thought like, okay, let's give it a go. And initially I had a good time with it. So in Fairy Tale we're looking at this teenage boy who is like, I don't know, a quarterback at his high school or something like that. And his father is a recovering alcoholic, his mother passed away, and one day when he's like cycling back home, he hears like a dog cry out or something like that, and then he finds out that his neighbor has fallen off of a ladder, and so his neighbor has to go to hospital. He's like a grumpy old man that kind of the kids in the neighborhood were kind of scared of. However, he then kind of takes it upon himself to take care of the dog while his neighbor cannot take care of him. And so the first third or so of the novel is really just like him bonding with this neighbor, bonding with his dog, and while there's just sort of like ominous elements in the background because there's a noise that occasionally comes from the shed and that's like left unexplained. And so that is where the fairy tale aspect is going to come into later. However, when I got to the fairy tale aspect of this story, I was just bored first of all, so it went really slow at that point in time, and like, you know, I always feel like Stephen King needs to edit down, and especially here I just felt like, please get a move on, you don't need 600 pages for this. But the main concern and the main reason why I put it down is that I could smell a magical cure coming from a mile away. And you know, magical cure is something that I can overlook in books sometimes, but you know, because I was already bored and with the idea of this potentially all ending in a magical cure, I was like, nope. So I asked some questions because there were multiple levels on which a magical cure could happen, and so I asked some questions to somebody who I knew had finished it, and based on those answers I decided that for me it was not worth it. So I DNF'd it halfway through, got through 300 pages of this book, but yeah, ultimately I decided it wasn't worth me going through another 300 to then be disappointed with a magical cure at the end. So yeah, didn't work for me. But so yeah, with that, we have talked about all the books that I read in the month of October, and so the number, as always, of my TBR will have been dwindling down throughout this video, but let's add the books that I acquired throughout this month in order to land at a number of 26. So we're landing on 26 at the end of October. I'm not gonna lie, I was expecting it to go a lot lower than that. There's one book that I haven't been able to finish. There's one book that I was gifted, which, I mean, I'm always happy that I get gifted books, don't get me wrong. So that means that there are 2 less books that I got around to. So that's adds 2 to the final tally, 2 compared to what I thought I was gonna get at. But still, it means 26 compared to 28 last month. So got it down by another 2 this month, so as long as I'm chipping away at it, even if it is at this slow pace as I've been doing for the past 2 months, it's still movement downwards, it's still potential, it's still landing me in a spot closer to my objective of getting under 20 for my physical TBR. But so yeah, with that I've said everything I needed to say in this video. Definitely let me know any thoughts you have on my reading this month or anything you want to share about your reading this month. Hope you guys enjoyed this video and see you guys for the next one. Bye!